Welcome to the Brick Lounge. My name is Nina Williams. I'm a solutions architect at Databricks. I'm based out of San Diego, California.
Great. And my name's Garrett Marengo. I'm an account manager at Databricks, and I work with Zipline. Excited to dive in today with everyone.
Hi, I'm Nikhil Simha. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Zipline AI, working with Garrett here. Thank you for having us on Brick Launch.
And hey, I'm Varant. I'm also a co-founder here at Zipline. Excited to be here today.
Awesome. We're very excited to have you here on the Brick Lounge. Just to start and kick it off, we'd love to hear a little bit more about the two of you, your backgrounds, and how you got to Zipline, and just tell us a little bit more about what you do and your stories.
Yeah, sure. So Nikhil and I worked together at Airbnb for many years prior to starting Zipline. I did a few years at Palantir before that, so I was always kind of in the data infrastructure space. And I think, at Airbnb is kind of where things got interesting. We were supporting a number of teams, but the biggest ones were the search, personalization, and the payments teams, basically, the trust and safety teams on payments. And actually, some of the teams that we supported at Airbnb were the search team that was doing search personalization, and the trust and safety teams that were doing a lot of the anti-fraud and fraud detection workflows across payments and across other surface areas of the product. So Nikhil and I were on a machine learning platform team supporting those use cases. And a lot of the pain points that we saw there is kind of what was the motivation to eventually start Zipline.
Very similar to Varant here. Been working with Varant here for over 8 years now. So a lot of overlap. But yeah, I have been supporting a bunch of teams that are in the intersection of data and AI and ML. So feature platform being one of them, embedding platform, another one, ML observability, and AI infra. And during that time, like Varant said, we worked with recommendation systems, customer support, fraud detection. Before that, I was at Facebook doing real-time data. Also happens to be in the ML and data intersection area, but with a real-time twist to it. And before that, I was at Amazon doing ML infra also. So been doing this for a while.
Yeah, it looks like you guys both have some pretty extensive backgrounds there.
I wanted to ask a question about that. So how was it for you guys? I mean, you started at, large companies. Going and, starting your own startup has got to be, not to put words in your mouth, but a little bit, nerve-wracking. How has that experience been like for you guys? It's been probably the biggest transition for you, kind of going into, working together on Zipline.
Yeah, it is very different. Yeah, I mean, some parts of it are tough as they're supposed to be for startups, but some parts of it are also a lot of fun. I think sometimes I say like the way it feels is, we used to be on a team that was basically providing internal tooling at Airbnb, essentially tooling for data scientists. And now it's kind of like we do that for a bunch of different customers. So it's almost like being on 15 different teams at the same time, and, all the good and the bad that comes with that. But ultimately, I think, some things, I really like about it is that, when you're doing, when you're on infra at one company, you just have to kind of work with the constraints of that company, and there's limits as to how far you can push the product and how much funding you can get for it, and how good you can make it because of just the limitations of, what sort of resourcing you can get. But when you're kind of at a company, and actually Databricks knows this quite well, like when you're at an infrastructure company building infrastructure for many customers, you can go farther with the product, and you can do more, and you can make it a better solution, and you can, the world's your oyster kind of for how far you can take it. And I think that is a big difference that I think is a lot of fun and makes the experience a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, anything to add to that, Nikhil?
I mean, those 2 points are pretty bang on. Like the diversity of use cases that we deal with now versus with an Airbnb is pretty different. And also building infra for infra is also very different. Like we couldn't justify building a front-end UI of any sorts, past places. Now it's a make or break thing for the product. So the product is sufficiently different than like what we could build at Facebook.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good segue. So we've talked a little bit about, the customer side of things. Talk to us a little bit about how Zipline is currently thinking about, their internal infrastructure, how you guys are, working with not only your customers, but, potentially leveraging Databricks as well as a part of that stack.
Yeah. We work with customers, largest customers on every cloud, on GCP, on Azure, and on AWS. And I mentioned diversity before, right? And like we have seen almost every warehouse that gets used here. There is Snowflake, BigQuery, Databricks, and there's like many other warehouses that folks come to us with. So the way we kind of use Databricks is as a source to Chronon, which is the open source project we built when we were at Airbnb. Basically, we power a lot of these machine learning decisions by consuming data from these sources, Databricks being one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of curious, like for our viewers that maybe have never heard of Zipline, like what's like just like the kind of TLDR, like what exactly do you guys do like for your customers and why are you unique?
Yeah, so we exist because building systems that power decisions for users. So decisions could be allowing this transaction or not, allowing a login or not, or recommending things to user or predicting what they would like, or like routing them to customers. Those decision systems, they involve different modalities of processing. So there is batch processing, there is stream processing, there is dealing with indexes. So it could be vector search or a key value store. And then there is serving. So there is like a wide variety of systems you need to build and connect to actually solve those use cases. So Zipline and Chronon, both of these things exist because those are really, really hard to do. Historically, only companies like Facebook or Netflix have had the talent density and money to like throw at people to like build these things well. And we exist to make that available for everyone.
So is that because it's like it's so resource intensive that only like these big players and actually do what you guys do, and now you're building it out and allowing just kind of regular players to use the same technology?
Exactly.
Cool. That's really cool.
Great. And what are you guys seeing from your end? I mean, in terms of the type of customers you're working with, is there a certain industry or, give us a little bit more context about, size of your customers and what's the goal for Zipline over the next year from the go-to-market side?
Yeah, it's mostly been larger enterprises. I think, if you look at where we're starting from, we are starting from this open source project that was driving production workloads at Airbnb and Stripe and, Netflix and OpenAI. So it kind of, when people associate, like at Zipline, they're often associating us with the open source project, and that has really good sort of proven traction with these larger enterprises. And I think in terms of, why they come to us and when they come to us, it's often that they're trying to do some more sophisticated decisioning systems in-house. And so oftentimes, they might have formerly relied upon an end-to-end vendor that's like, hey, like we just call your API and you tell us like yes, no, block or whatever. And now they're like, okay, actually, we want to do some more interesting data science in-house or build some more AI systems ourselves in-house. And then we become like a way to do that more effectively to kind of bridge that gap between relying on an end-to-end vendor to starting to build systems in-house. That's one thing that we've seen. And I think now is a good time for that in general is what we've seen. It's like a lot of folks are trying to be a little more AI and ML native as a company and leverage it better. And, I think, that's been one thing that we've kind of seen. So yeah, I mean, insurance has been an interesting space in that regard as well, where it's like, again, it's like anything that's just kind of high value, high risk, high stakes decisioning systems. So like credit underwriting, fraud detection, personalization, these sorts of things. This is kind of where we've seen traction. And again, like at scale, because a lot of things are easy when data's small and fits on one machine, but a lot of things get really hard when data sizes go up and latency budgets are tight and stakes are high and systems need to be production at scale with, very high QPS and a lot of data flowing through the system. So that's kind of where we slot in.
It looks like you implement your product within like several different platforms, not just Databricks. So I'm curious, like, what has been your experience as a startup, wanting to get your product into like, Databricks users accounts, like your partnership with Databricks and like Garrett and Derek, for example, like what's that experience been like? Has it been your user experience in general? Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
We play best with Databricks, I would say. Like if a customer has Databricks already, that's a very native integration for us. I mean, so we built at Airbnb and Stripe, right? And Airbnb and Stripe did not exactly have Databricks, but they were Spark native shops that had, data in Iceberg format on basically S3, usually with a Hive catalog on top. And if you take that setup of like how data lives and then, processing in Spark, it's pretty similar to what Databricks likes to do. In that, like, S3, Iceberg is like a very well supported format on Databricks catalog and so on. And like S3 is the standard kind of AWS, at least backend, blob storage. So, when we think about integrating Zipline, which, you can think of as, again, like this decision system powering engine that takes data and runs processes and so on, the environment that we initially built it in was pretty similar to Databricks, basically, at least closer to Databricks than other clouds. So it was always like one of the cleaner, easier integrations, I would say, although, by now we figured it out with other warehouses too. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of like one of the reasons why we like working we like working with Databricks customers.
Yeah. So, I was going back to kind of your earlier comments too. I mean, obviously, me coming from the go-to-market side, I'm always curious how you guys are thinking about it. I thought you did a really good job of kind of explaining the business value that Zipline brings to, some of these larger enterprises. How are you guys thinking about like a company that maybe, a Series A startup like yourself that you would be going into selling to? Like, what does that conversation look like for you guys? Because I know that's kind of Nikhil, you and I have talked about it. The future for you guys is a little different. You guys are starting with larger enterprise, but you want to work towards some of these, more low-hanging fruit, mid-sized companies.
For us, the most successful sale usually is when someone who knows they want to be on the cutting edge, they're like, okay, we have these models, we have a baseline, but they're not good enough for our business here. And we want to be on the cutting edge and do things that companies like Facebook or TikTok or Netflix do in terms of like what kind of models they use, how they use data in these models. So that tends to be the strongest sale for us. They know they want to be on the cutting edge. They're not starting from zero and they want the best performance for business decisions. So and they're also usually enterprises that have already tried the basic version. That tends to be the strongest sale for us here. So, I mean, that is the biggest reason why we are currently very focused on large enterprises and building the product around that. But eventually, we think anyone that is operating in the industries that we talked about will end up needing these decisioning systems. And like just projecting a bit more further with AI. AI is going to be really good at doing the feature engineering and model development, but it needs a strong infra baseline to operate on top of and run experiments on. So I think like long term, we are like trending towards this auto research direction where the users are just enumerating the data that they have and the decision that they want to target. And like the model goes and like runs hundreds of experiments or thousands of experiments and figures out the most valuable features and the most impactful model architecture. And then it just gives them an endpoint. Hey, this is the decision. It's like fully custom to your warehouse. So there is like another way of going at it, which is like building one way of doing feature engineering and one way of doing model development for everyone that operates in that business, regardless of what custom market or what custom segment that those companies are targeting. So we kind of bring that to the table, I think, like for all the companies that are slightly different, like we kind of fit their data differently and fit it better. And like, I think like AI is a huge multiplier for like getting us there.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for explaining that, Nikhil. That's super helpful. I guess kind of piggybacking, since we're talking about this, one thing that you guys had mentioned to me was how you guys have implemented a system, I would call it like customer success, that you saw, in previous roles at Palantir, pre-Airbnb for you, Varant. Talk a little bit about what it's like to, like how you see success once you guys are working with a customer and how you maintain that level of, service for them. What does that look like for Zipline?
To answer the first part of that question, like what does success end up looking like for a customer? I think that is one thing that we like about like the space that we're in, is supporting these high stakes, decisioning use cases, is that there's a measurable result at the end of that. And it could be, reducing fraud, which can be measured in dollars, or it could be, driving conversions, which again is measured in dollars. So it's like there is a very tangible outcome, and teams don't find it too hard to connect that tangible outcome to whatever leverage we provided them. So that's really good for us. We like that. We like being very, very clear about the value add. So I think, Garrett, you were asking kind of about like how does AI play a role in like that, like post initial, POC, or like, post deployment success process, basically. Yeah. So I think what we have seen is that essentially, like Nikhil said, it's like, agents have been writing a lot of code, like AI has been writing a lot of code for people. Similarly, there's like a Zipline surface area that's exposed to them, and it's sort of codey. It's like code light, like a relatively friendly API that they interact with. And basically, but like, more and more, we've seen customers move towards using AI plus Zipline to build these decision systems, on top of their warehouse. And effectively, what it's meant is two things. One is just far greater developer velocity on the customer side. So like they can move faster and do more things. But two, because the AI tends to get things right the first time more often, it just results in like less confusion and less sort of questions coming our way, so that we can scale faster and better with, a lighter customer support burden. And I mean, it gets into another interesting topic, which is like, what do APIs mean in a world where agents are writing a lot of code and doing a lot of things? And we kind of have our, point of view on this. And I think, we built the Zipline API to be human friendly, right? So that humans can build these very complex systems and define these very complex transformations in a simple surface area and have all the complexity kind of brushed under the hood for scaling that infrastructure and deploying those systems to production and so on. But basically what we've seen is that those ergonomics that we built for humans is translating very well to like agent ergonomics, this kind of concept of agent ergonomics, where if you offer the right abstraction that the AI can just focus on defining the semantics of whatever it wants to build, and you abstract away how to make the infra scale to serve that in production, it results in basically like people's ability to use AI to actually build production ready systems far faster. So anyway, I kind of transitioned from your question into another topic, but we found this idea like, okay, well, like what does an API mean in the agentic age quite interesting, and basically our point of view is like what we've seen actually be tangibly valuable is to just allow the agent to focus on semantics as much as possible, because that's what it's good at. They are language models. They're good at semantics and expressing semantics, and then brush the actual infrastructure, the thing that's going to run production workloads that, it's going to need to serve QPS with certain latency, have that be deterministic and have that be provided by, the platform itself. And that's basically the philosophy that we've taken. And the result of that is that people are able to use AI to build systems on Zipline. And those things have tended to scale pretty well and to work in production the way they need to. Which has been good for us from a customer support point of view, because this kind of very technical, and again, this is something that Databricks knows well, right? It's like very technical product that you're selling to engineers and data scientists. They have complex things that they're trying to do with that, and the more that they can self-serve, the better it's going to be for both for them and their velocity, but also for the customer support hours per customer that you guys need to think about. So yeah, that's basically what we've seen. And so we think the timing now for like building in this space is kind of good, because AI helps us grow faster, scale faster, basically.
Yeah, love it. No, I totally agree with everything you said. And I do think there's a lot of similar foundational views there that we share here internally at Databricks. So, and I think it, works well for us, and it's, proven to be a good method.
Yeah, I mean, like away from more of like the tech and the business part, like just curious, you guys have been through a lot, like leaving these big companies and these big roles to branch out and start your own business, which can be scary and exciting at the same time. Curious, like what advice you have for other people going through the same, contemplating, should I do this? Should I not do this? And like what advice you would have for them?
I would say, especially, and I think this is becoming especially more true as AI makes, more things kind of possible and people can like build stuff themselves really easily. I think, and this won't apply to everyone or like every use case, but I think if you're building in the data space or in the infrastructure space in general, I think my main thing is, solve an extremely difficult problem. Basically, don't, there's a lot of like, things that you see that feel like sort of, I mean, I don't want to say extractive, but like kind of, if you're not solving like the really hardest part of something, then it's unlikely that it's going to, I think, add enough value to justify a vendor procurement process actually looks like at a customer. Like once you see that a few times, like you come to understand that that's like a lot of overhead, right? And to overcome that overhead, you need to be solving something extremely complex and extremely difficult and extremely high value, which I think it's checking those boxes is difficult, and a lot of folks don't. But I think if you don't check those boxes, if you're not doing something that's both very, very difficult and very high value, then you're just going to have an even harder time basically getting through a procurement process, and things are kind of going to, maybe the message might resonate a little bit, but things won't like go through all the way. So even though that's a very high initial bar to even start something, it's like, okay, well, like, it might take you a decade to feel like you know that problem well enough and you've solved it really well. I would still say, do that, because if you don't do that, you're just going to hit a different issue, and that's going to kind of become the thing that the company could stumble on. So I don't know, solve the hardest thing, the thing that adds the most value, and the thing that's like, almost nobody else can do, I think is basically my advice. And again, I mean, that advice is very much painted from having operated in like infrastructure and data and ML and production systems at scale. So it won't apply to everyone, and it won't apply to every sector. But I think if that's where you are, that's my advice.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the parts that hit were just solving something challenging. If it was easy, everyone would do it, right? And valuable. I think that was very important too. Nikhil, did you have some advice?
Yeah, I mean, enterprise data it takes a lot of energy, a lot of mental energy. And if there isn't like one thing that really drives you, it's really hard to like stay in this. For me personally, at least, it is like actually watching customers like use the tool and be like, oh, this really does save us so much pain. That's probably what drives me the most. And that's also like what drives the technical decisions in the company. It's like, okay, is this actually going to make the customer's life materially better? And for us, Zipline is, or Chronon also, the open source project is also born out of that. People were hand building these systems with like tens of thousands of lines of code or hundreds of thousands of lines of code over and over again for each use case. That's what drives me, at least. I think having one really strong reason to keep going, I think, is very important. And I would add that to the Venn diagram that Varant put out. Very valuable, very hard to do, and something that you can pour your energy into.
So, I mean, you guys have shared your journey with us. You've come a long way to be here today, from your, corporate lives to your startup and, development and, now productionalizing and growing. What's next for Zipline? Like what's in store for you guys? What's on your roadmap?
Yeah, we trying to solve as many problems in this part of building decision-making systems or auto-decisioning systems, like we like to call them, and they come in many varieties, many use cases, but we want to be very end-to-end. So right now we are like looking at that scope of where you already have your data in the warehouse or in your event streams and operating on top of that to build the decision systems, and we hand off like process data to the models. It could be an LLM or it could be ML model. So we want to move also into the space where we are helping both the adjacent problems of operating the models ourselves and also helping people with ingesting data. So most of the problems that we work with, like that slow us down, tend to be around these two areas. Like people find it hard to, they find it easy to use Zipline, but they find it hard to like kind of integrate with their existing model infra and wire everything through. So we want to make that easy. They also find it difficult to connect their data into Zipline. I mean, we help a lot there, but it's better for us to like kind of control that part of the funnel also.
Well, that was super insightful. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to walk through how you're thinking about, go to market, the technical side of Zipline. It's really exciting to see how you guys are not only working with customers but also Databricks. In true fashion of the Brick Lounge, we're going to end this with a little lightning round of quick questions. One that we like Nina always likes to do is what's a tool or resource that you guys can't live without right now?
For me, it is Zippy. So we built like a terminal manager for our own use. So we can spin up agents from Slack basically to do tasks. We have customized it to our coding guidelines. Like we have a very specific way of like being thorough with requirements gathering and design and decisioning and stuff. So we built it around our way of working.
I mean, yeah, definitely AI coding. I'm more broadly same answer, but I guess a broader answer. I mean, I'm in the CEO role now, so I'm not necessarily doing as much coding, but still, for me to be able to like see a customer issue or see something and like at least put out a prototype, and someone else might come and completely change it and rewrite it, but to have this like high fidelity like prototype of a new feature or a fix or something that I can actually like express in code is just such a good loop. So I really like, I mean, that's been huge.
Yeah. I like that you brought that up, Varant, because so the next question we usually ask is best place of career advice that you've ever received. I do like that one, but just kind of putting a little twist on it. You guys are kind of like, OG engineers at this point. Like you guys were in the industry before the AI boom and all that. What's some of the advice you can give to some of these new engineers coming up, how they should be thinking about still having a foundation, in terms of their knowledge of coding, and then how are you guys thinking about using it, in future state? That's kind of a big question, but I think it's good because you guys have been around a while. So
honestly, advice I got early on in my career that I think I would certainly still pass along in this day and age is like, the people who you work with early on are going to have a huge impact on you and your skills and your abilities. And I think that's still very true today. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that like we're now in this gray beard generation. But I think, if you can working with folks who are still doing, deep work themselves and still thinking deeply about problems and not fully relying on, reasoning from agents and AI, I think is valuable and will remain valuable. I think people, having human judgment still has, a huge amount of value, and I think we'll do so soon. So I think working with people that you feel like that can help you sharpen those skills, that's gonna pay dividends for your career. I think I would say that to someone starting out today.
The ones I got early on that have been super impactful were, it's on this 80-20 principle. 20% of the things you do is like what really matters, tend to have 80% of the impact. And if you're good at like figuring out which 20% of work is that, like which work is important, which work is noise, and that's been super pivotal for me. So that also means you need to look at the big picture to understand what the impact of the work you're doing is. And I think it's very, very true with AI because you can go pretty far on like things that don't have impact for a long time. Like you'll get that sense of progress, but like it's not real progress because it doesn't solve like anything of use. Yeah, being like very focused on impact and trying to understand how to judge what's impactful or not, I think it's very important. And getting like early feedback is also important. The other one is like again like being very connected to how the customers feel about what you're building, or like how users, someone who's using your software, feeling about what you built. I think that's a very important piece of advice I got and kind of shaped how I look at software in general.
Yeah. I like that last one. That's really good. I think I agree with that. Listening to the customer is key. Well, great. And then just the last one here. This one's kind of meant to be fun. One prediction for data and AI in the next 2 years from each of you, if you could.
Yeah, I guess mine is that probably like more impact will be driven from better infrastructure and Rails than it will be from improved models. Like I think models will get smarter, and that's good. They should get smarter, but I think right now the bottleneck for most companies is just like the overhead of implementation and the right infrastructure and the right plumbing, which Databricks is definitely doing things there. So I think you guys are in a good space.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to what Varant said. I kind of see it as like you need to collect as many good judgments as possible into your software stack and leave very few surface areas for the model to kind of experiment with. So, I mean, just like having a really solid platform, I think Databricks is a pretty solid platform, and I think we are trying to be one too. I think having a really good set of tools that agents can like work with seamlessly is really important, I think, and that will probably mean companies that do deep work that will end up getting valued more. And I also think the industry will start moving away from building half-baked solutions in-house because the difference will be much larger now. Yeah, they're just the vague predictions that I think there will be more. I think like there are other people, experts in the industry who have made like good decisions about how the platform should be, and you should just build on top of that, either via open source or by like using a vendor.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Really interesting questions.
And yeah, excited to partner with Zipline moving forward. It's really exciting what you guys have going on. So appreciate the time today.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, guys.